Hello, this is Becca from Willow Hill Designs, and welcome. Today I'm continuing on with the Jane Austen 250th anniversary Block of the Month quilt, which was designed by Lori Holt. And this month we're on the Hampshire block. And this is the block here. Hampshire is very significant in that that's where Jane was born. Jane lived in two counties really during her lifetime. One was Hampshire and the other was Somerset. So she was born in Hampshire in 1775, and she lived at the rectory there till they moved in 1801 to go to Bath. And her father was a clergyman, but he also schooled little boys in reading, literature, writing. And both of Jane's parents believed in educating their children. They had a very nice library, and all the children were very well read. Excuse me. And but Jane really had the ability with words, with writing, and she wrote from a young age. She wrote in her teenage years. That was one of the ways she entertained her family, was by reading her writings. Of course, today we have TVs and iPads and phones, and of course books as well, but that was really a big form of entertainment, and she was very witty. The people that speak of her, I think her great niece speaks of her and says that she was very witty, and she had kind of a satirical sense of humor, which really entertained the family. But I think we can all agree that Jane had just such a way with words, and I don't know, it's just a joy to read her novels. So Hampshire does have a nice meaning in this quilt, and Jane was very happy there, living there at the rectory. Those were very happy years of her life. So she was there till she was about 26. And so this first block, it's very nice to think about that when making it. So this is really an easy block, just two shapes, kind of a tulip shape and a long leaf shape. And before I went ahead to make that block, which these blocks surround the center block, which we already did, the Chawton block, there's this little checkerboard here that kind of, to me, informs what comes after that, which when you go forward, moving out from the center, those colors are kind of important there. And I'll see if I can bring that up on my iPad just for a closer look at it. Here, so surrounding that Chawton block is this sort of a checkerboard with these 4 cornerstones, and I kind of feel that they lead you to your next color story going around this quilt. So being that I did not use that solid ivory fabric behind the Chawton block, I wasn't sure whether to go with the solid ivory for the applique blocks. And I didn't. I actually went with the correspondence fabric. So I cut my blocks, my 10-inch blocks, from the correspondence fabrics. And I love this fabric. Well, I love fabric with script, but I love this because it has her writings on it. And I just feel that's so meaningful. To have Jane's actual writings on these blocks, for me anyway, that just makes it even more a Jane quilt. So I'll show you my Chawton block. and how I went about going on to choose those blocks surrounding. So this is my Chawton block finished, and I'll just show you, I did not do a hand applique on this block because right now I'm just about ready to begin a quilt for my son and daughter-in-law that I've worked for long months on. Matter of fact, I'll show that quilt quickly. I'm getting ready to start quilting their quilt. And you'll understand why I just don't want to I just don't want to do that hand applique at this time. This was quite a labor of love, this quilt, with this cabin and all of the details in it. And I have a few other projects that I'm working on. So that kind of helped me decide that I did not want to hand applique all of these blocks, being that each applique block, there are 4 of them, and I think there's 25 or 26 of those applique blocks, so that seemed a lot. So I'll just show you that if you can see on here, you really can't see the machine applique. This is an invisible stitch on here. I think that's what they call it, the invisible stitch. It's just 1, 2, 3 straight stitches with a little bite into the fabric, 1, 2, 3, little bite in, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And choosing colors that match the applique pieces, you really can't tell that this has been machine appliqued, I don't think. So all of this is machine appliqued, and I'll just zoom out so that I can show you kind of what prompted my decisions next. Let me just move this out of the way. Excuse my arm here. Move these things out of the way. And so in order to decide whether to use the correspondence fabric, I decided to try to make up a little sample of the checkerboard that would be going around the quilt. No, the block. And so this is what I decided on. I'll just move that over a bit. So these are the fabrics that I decided to use for the checkerboard going around this little quilt. Block. And these are the colors to show them up a little bit more closely. This is the red and ivory, and this is kind of that taupe, sort of a taupe color, latte, maybe latte color. That is the first row of the checkerboard, and then I decided to graduate to a little bit darker color, but yet still keeping that red in there, so that it will be the taupe with this lighter ivory and red, and then the taupe with this darker ivory and red, building its way out, because if you look at the quilt and you go out further, this little tiny fabric right here that is in the flying geese is also out here, and that is also an ivory with a red. So I felt that these two colors would support that ivory and red. And let's see, I think I have it here. Yes, this will be the base for the flying geese, this color. So that kind of, again, informed these colors for me. I liked the way this progression of the lighter ivory with red, and then the darker ivory with red, and then this color, they all seem to kind of go together. Now, in the pattern, it calls for this color, I think this was Colonel Brandon, to be used for the flying geese, which I think would be okay. I think that color would be okay, but I wasn't completely sure about that. I also have this red, which is by Renee Nanneman, and it's called Wildflowers. And I was thinking that this might be a pretty flying geese to kind of tie across the quilt. There's a lot of red in the center block, and moving out, this will go around the quilt at this point here, around this small border, but it will also reappear. It also, that little border is here, but it also appears out here. And maybe I will use the original color out there, but I'm thinking for this small border here, around that center Chawton block, I think I may use that red. So before I proceeded, you know, because this was the correspondence fabric, thinking would it be okay to use the correspondence fabric here, and I decided yes, it would be okay to use that. Hopefully everything won't run in together. I think maybe this bright red here will delineate things a little bit. And then again, maybe it won't look choppy. Maybe it will blend nicely. I don't know. And my thought is for these blocks here, I would also use something from that same fabric line, which is Wildflowers, again by Renee Nanneman. And maybe that would be out in these corners, out here. That ties in nicely with the red. That kind of goes in nicely with this red. And with the ivory, with the red. Of course, it's still early to make those decisions, but those are kind of thoughts that I had. And of course, this was the choice that I had for that little tiny border around the quilt, which would go in here, this little tiny border, which is in, let me see, right here around the Chawton block. So that color I was thinking of putting here. So that kind of a, not coffee, but I guess maybe a dark taupe color seems to tie in nicely with that, and of course the red with this. So these are kind of, you really can't plan too far ahead, but at the same time you do have to know where your colors are going. The other thing to make a decision about as well is this little corner block here around the checkerboard, these 4 corner squares. Now they have a large floral there, and again, that's pretty, but I don't know if that's what I will use. I'm thinking of maybe using this for that little cornerstone. Let's see if I can move this up. I'm thinking of possibly using that for the cornerstone. We're still not quite in the frame, are we? Let's move that up. Possibly that. Or this, which is one of the Jane Austen reproduction fabrics. I may use this, which I think would look pretty as well with that. So those are some of my choices that I'm going for. I thought I would share them, and I thought I would share my process for arriving at those decisions that I needed to see basically what I was going to use for the this little checkerboard. Now they recommend the navy blue and ivory dot for the checkerboard and this fabric. for the checkerboard, and that just didn't really suit my vision for this. Not to say it wasn't pretty, it is, but just didn't suit my vision. So that's kind of where I am, and that is how I arrived at these decisions. So I'll just show you my Hampshire blocks. Let's see. I don't have little design boards that are that size. I have to make some that are 10 by 10, but this is one of them. Let's come back in. So this is one of the blocks that I have chosen, and I again did a little friction pen outline to let me know this would be cut down to 8.5. And I wanted to keep this point 1/2 inch from the edge, so that when I sew my 1/4 inch seam, there's still a 1/4 inch beyond this little tulip flower. And this was simple. It was just tulips and these pointed leaves. And the colors, the fabrics that I used for that block were this one, which I love. And this one, I had just a tiny little piece of that. And this one for the stems, but the colors were right. That color just seems to go so nicely. So I wasn't concerned that it was a stripe. I'm basically going by color. So those are the 3 fabrics that I used in this block. And these are right now just glued down with an applique glue. And I'll go through and do that invisible stitch again on these, the machine applique stitch. So that's one block. I really need better boards than these. Here's another block. Oh, and I guess I can take it off of there. Here's another block. And I loved these colors as well. I kind of went with warm colors with these blocks. There's 4 of them, and they're scattered about the quilt. Let's see. She has them. I noticed she has sort of a pattern here with them. She's got them on the top row at the end, the bottom row at the beginning, the right row at the end, and the left row at the top. So it's interesting how she's placing them. So maybe we'll place them that way, and then again maybe I will just go by color and what looks nice next to each other. So the fabrics I used in this block were this one, which is a Jane Austen fabric. I love that. And this one for the leaves, which is an absolute favorite of mine. Love this color. And for the stems, I used this, which was interesting. It had some kind of movement in the fabric with the lighter lines and then these kind of peachy colors. And I just think it added a little something extra. So that was the second one that I decided to make. Second colors, and this is the 3rd one. Let's see, bring this over here, and this is an older fabric that I've had for quite a while, but I thought the colors kind of went with all of the other colors in the block. And this is the fabric that I used for the flowers, and just kind of trying to fussy cut and maybe get a little more of the red in there than the paisleys. But that is the flowers, and this is the leaves. This is an older one that I have. Makes me think of a woodcut for some reason. I think that's very pretty fabric, and I used that same stripe that I used in the first fabric for the stems here. So that's block number 3. And here is block number 4. Take that off of here. Here's block number 4. And this one I decided to use a pretty kind of a gold fabric. And again, this is just all warm colors in these 4 blocks. And this is the fabric that I chose. I think this is a Jane Austen. Oh, maybe not. No, this is by Diana Ford Hall, whom I absolutely loved her work. We lost her too soon, but I love this fabric. So this was for the little tulips here. And the leaves on this, I want to say this is by Three Sisters. This is an oldie. But again, I loved that color with the yellow, the kind of gold. And I decided to use this one with the little roses on it for the stems. And I just felt like that kind of was nice. It tied in. There's little touches of pink here that tie in. So those are the fabrics that I used to choose the colors for this block. And I didn't turn the edges on this one so that I could show you how that was done. And I thought I would also show you the leaf shape. So if you will hold on and just give me a second, I will get set up here and I'll show you using my applique method. Let's see, I need my sandpaper board. I'll show you my method for turning the edges on these, and I will be right back with that. So now, the first thing that I would do for this, oh, I should get in frame, that would help. The first thing that I would do would be, of course, I had showed in my last video that I ironed the Floriani washable stabilizer on the back, and iron it and cut out with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then where these little valleys are, I would just make a clip. And where the points are, I would narrow that down quite a bit. I would trim it so that it looks like that. We don't really want all that up there at that point, all that extra fabric up there at that point. So, and again, I like to use Soline glue for this. And I would just take my glue, and I always start with the center first on these flowers. And they're very, very easy to do. Just take, I'm just putting a little dab at that very tip so that we have a consistent line of glue going across there. And using my finger and feeling the edge of that shape, I'm just pushing it against the edge of the shape, this Floriani shape. The next thing I would do would be to tackle this little curved petal here. And again, just pinching from the edge, pinch it right across like that. And I would go to the other side, putting some glue. And again, I would just push and pinch going across that shape. And you can look on the other side to make sure you like it, that it looks okay. And then, because this is a fairly gentle curve, I don't have to clip this with pinking shears or anything. I would just put my glue on here. And the first thing I kind of like to do is make sure that this little flap of fabric meets that edge. Let's see, meets that edge right there. And then I would just hold that and bring in this side a little bit. And then you can continue just folding, feeling that edge, pressing against it. And then when I get up here, just give that a little more glue. I would just try to make sure again I'm meeting that edge, and take my stiletto and just kind of adjust that little edge right there so that it's not showing, and looking around at all the edges to make sure, do I like the way it looks? Does it look like anything's poking out or jutting out? And now I would just turn it over. Here's a little thread that's sticking out, a little thread here from that edge. And then I would look at the shape and see, do I like it? Does it look as if it's smooth? If it is, then I would press it, and I'll just go over here and press that quickly. And right here, I don't have it with me right here, but I would take some fray check and just put a little fray check in those two corners just to secure them. And so then this can be placed on the block. And I would measure, I would take out my little ruler, and I would put the half-inch line on this friction line down here. Just lay it right on there. And then you know that this is 1/2 inch, and lining this little point up with the friction line, I would make sure that that is 1/2 inch away. And then I would just put my pins in to secure that. And of course, you can straighten your stems as you go. Now this little piece, the leaf, is a little bit more difficult, I guess, kind of, in a sense. And this one I would trim down a lot right at that tip, and cut that tip down so that it's maybe under 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, or a little more, 3/16. And of course, around this curve, I wouldn't have too much fabric. Like, you can have more on these edges, where up here you'd need it to be less fabric, just so that it'll all gather in. So I would just start at the tip with some glue, and this glue washes out, so that's not a concern. And I would fold that tip up to cover, put a little dab of glue on that folded part, and then fold over, following again that shape, and then folding over on the other side. And don't drop it. Folding over on the other side, following that little edge. Then, once that's done, it looks like this. We got the kind of tough part out of the way. I would just take my glue pen, glue stick, and just come around. And here I would start up at this corner, and I would just fold it over, and with your finger or your thumb, I would pull and gather, and press with your, keep moving your finger as you gather those edges to press them down into the glue. And you can look and see if anything looks like it's kind of got a little point. Then you can pick it up and go ahead and just turn it. Same thing with this side. Just take your thumb and press along that edge. Could use a tiny bit more glue there. And just press along that edge like that. And then I would turn it over to see, is there anything I don't like? Looks to me like there's a little tiny point there and there. and I would just try to fix those, and maybe one up here. And the glue is still wet enough. Oh, I still see that little tip. The glue is still wet enough that you can adjust it. And so it's just that quick to do that shape. And again, I would press this. Take it to your pressing surface. And these edges are all secured. And I've made many, many, many quilts this way, and you don't ever have to worry about them coming unraveled or undone in any way. And again, I would just use my diagonal line to place this, and then I would just take my pins and secure this down. And before I went to took it to the machine, I would do my glue basting, and I would use Roxanne's or Sue Daly's glue basting. And what I would do is just take one pin out, just fold this back, and do just little dots, like kind of smaller than the size of the head of that pin. Press that down to glue it. And if you were on a piece of cardboard, let's see, or let's see, like this, if you're on a piece of cardboard, I would just put my pin in there, or your design board. I have to make some up. And then for this end, I would take this and lift this up. Again, dot, 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 dot of the glue, and then lay it down and put my pin in there. And then just leave it like that, and it only takes about 10 or 15 minutes to dry. So now this is all ready to be glued and stitched down. So all four blocks, all four of the Hampshire blocks are done. And I love them. I think they're pretty. This is one of the blocks that I do like. So here's all four of my blocks. Let's see if I can show them all at once. Hopefully these colors will look pretty when integrated into the quilt. Let's see. Move that over. And this. No, I guess we have to go out a little bit. So here are my four blocks, and hopefully they'll look pretty when they're all kind of integrated in. But I like them. Are they all right side up? Yes, the writing is all right side up. That's one of the things you have to watch when placing your blocks if you are doing the correspondence, to make sure your writing is right side up. You wouldn't want to put your block in upside down or sideways, I guess. And then again, maybe you would. Maybe you would think that's interesting. So lastly, I thought I would just show quickly how I make the binding strips for this little, for these little blocks. I'll come back in. And what I would do is for a 1/4 of an inch stem, it's not really bias, it's not on the bias. What I would do is cut it 1 1/8. So these strips were cut 1 1/8 inches, and then from the raw edge, not the folded edge, but the raw edge, I would stitch with a 1/4 inch seam going all the way down, not from the folded edge, but the raw edge. And then afterwards, you just take your scissors and trim. You want to trim that seam allowance to about 1/8 of an inch, like this, just so that it's not too bulky. because we're going to turn that to the back. And what I would do then is spray this with spray starch. I like Best Press, and I use 1/2 water and 1/2 Best Press, and I'll just spray that quickly and show you. I would just take this on my mat and spray it with spray starch. And then I use these plastic bias bars, but there's also metal ones. I love the metal ones too. This is 1/4 inch. So you would just take this and insert it in your seam, your little pocket, little, what would we call this?
Your stem.
Just like that. And just move it so that the seam, your seam allowance is on the back of this strip. So that's what it would look like. And this is not a heavy starch like the Niagara. This is just 1 part water, 1 part Best Press. And so then I would take that to my iron. Let me see if my iron will reach. I think it will. So first I would iron on the seam side, and your bar kind of arches up, but it relaxes back down. And then I would iron from the other side. And see, the bar relaxes back out again. And then I would just slip it off like that. And then I would just take my iron and press from the top and from the back side as well. I mean, you don't have to press if you'd like it to look a little more round, especially if you're doing hand applique. You wouldn't have to press. You might want that rounded look. And then I would just take my little ruler. This is an Omni Grid ruler, and I would just measure 4.5. This is 4.5, and then I would just snip. That's what the size of these stems should be. 4.5 inches. And your seam is on the back. I don't know, I have a little bit more difficult time with the bias makers, the bias tape makers like this. I don't know, sometimes I find mine open up a little bit. I have these and I have used them, but I just like this method a little bit better. So here are 2 stems that I might be able to use in a future block. I'll just set these aside. So it's just as easy as that. So let me just pop this away. So that is where I am with the Jane Austen quilt, and I will come back and show you these machine appliqued, like my Chawton block. And here is the Chawton block, and I think the colors look pretty with it. We can kind of get a little bit better picture here of these colors with this block. So I think it will be nice looking. And again, machine applique, you really can't see it. It's just invisible, just about. If you can match your color
Red.
to the fabric, it's almost invisible. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope you're enjoying making this quilt in remembrance of a favorite author of, I know, all of us who are making this quilt. So let me come back in again. So thanks for joining me, wishing you many blessings. Bye for now.